And speaking of doing for ourselves, we rely upon our elected leadership. And we see them as our partners, not our bosses. Our compatriots in building a better community. And one of them I'd like to invite here to say some words is Councilwoman Kim Rafferty. Kim, could you please?
It seems to me we have a failure to communicate. When I was given the job to look at transit, everyone I went to had a different story. My mom sent you to spy on me. Thank you. Say nice things. And so I go to our local officials who don't have a clue. And we've already heard the stories. We've heard them tonight. We've heard them for 20, 30 years. We don't necessarily need to look at the stories anymore. We need to look at the solutions. So I start, again, looking at the local level. You know, my problem is the city of Birmingham. No, it's not. It's the metro area. It's that we have the BJCTA that has no funding for operational costs. Whose fault is that? The state of Alabama. The city is struggling. Every city that participates is struggling to meet that financial burden. It's the federal government's fault because they put a population restriction on using federal funds for operational costs. So it doesn't matter how many grants the BJCTA gets, our population is too large to use it for those simple operational costs like keeping the air conditioning, such as keeping the engines from catching on fire. And it's very obvious that the people who ran the BJCTA before made some extraordinarily bad decisions. We also have two other transit systems here locally. We have Kid 1, who transports our children in the rural and in the metro area from one side of the state to the other. And we have Class Tran that works to transport our physically and mentally disabled that cannot, for the limits of the BJCTA, get the transportation they need. We have 3 transportation systems. But first I want to ask you, what is the largest, most pervasive transportation system in the world? Nobody ever gets this. And somebody actually touched on it earlier. Martha. I think she knows because I told her. Does anybody know?
School buses.
Thank you, finally. School buses. So, transit is a part of every single aspect of our lives. How many people in this room do public transit here in Birmingham? How many people do public transit when they visit outside the city in another city? You see what? We are clueless. There is a failure to communicate.
And some of it is that don't even have it, though.
Well, I understand. Every failing metro that you look at has a bad education system, and we're not here to, unfortunately, to talk about that, but a failing transit system. If you don't have those two, you don't have the foundation you need to build a better life, quality of life, environment, and opportunity for the people that are living in the area. So, what's my job? My job is to tell you what you need to do, because there's a failure to communicate. So I go to the BJCTA, I go to Class Tran, I go to Kid 1. They're coordinating their services now. They're trying to improve. BJCTA has brought in new people outside of the area who actually have experience running successful transit systems in other places. As a result of that, almost 1/2 of their fleet has been replaced. So those breakdowns are fewer and far between. They've increased their maintenance schedule. And they are looking at trying to restructure our hub and spoke design, which is the most ridiculous and mis-serving type of system. Now, the second thing that I did is I gave up on the local. I mean, until I have a plan of action to present to the mayor and to the council, they're not going to get it. Jefferson County Commission, they're not going to get it. So I have to move on to the state level. Here's the issue at the state level. We have no statewide transit group. I take that back, functional transit group. We have about 500,000 of them, but we have a failure to communicate.
What about Tran?
That's part of the BJCTA. So at the state level, we have to look at creating that funding source. We also look at having to unite my job, because I'm about to give you your job, my job is to coordinate the focus. We have to have one voice, one vision, one goal. And that is functional transit at the state level. It has to start there for it to come down here. Okay? My job is to get all of those executive directors in the same line. I've already met with Huntsville. I'm meeting with Mobile and Montgomery. We're at a unique situation at the state level. Every one of our metro systems is now peaking out at that metro population level. So, except for Huntsville, and Shelby gave them a special exemption at the federal level, everybody's going to use they're going to lose their access to operational costs at the federal level. So we're all in trouble. The second thing has to do with streamlining of services. Again, if we get the 4 areas to start working on streamlining of services and incorporating Kid 1 or incorporating Classroom, we can reach out to the rural areas in a more effective way. The third thing that we're looking at is, somebody had mentioned environmental issues. We already know the impact to Jefferson County on the increased levels of nitrous oxides and volatile organic compounds. 2 agencies in Jefferson County, aside from Alabama Power, actually we have no measurement of what they contribute, but they're the largest contributors of air pollution in the world. Airports and cars. We have no transit system to move people even out of the airport. We're booking them in here, and everybody's having to take a car to get out. There's no transit system to move one to the other. And let me tell you, somebody just sent me an email the other day. This lady posted a wedding announcement. And in the wedding announcement, and the details about the city where the wedding's being held in the Birmingham area, rent a car, transit sucks. Excuse me, God. But that's exactly what the posting said. That's very profound. Failure to communicate. So I'm meeting with the 4 executive directors, and so far they're very excited about having one voice, one vision, one goal. Here's the problem in the state. 2, we have that mystery monster in the corner that I can't find where anybody's actually seen them or talked to them, and that's called road and bridge builders. We keep blaming them. When was the last time somebody drove their families to the table and laid down the law and laid down the realities of the situation? That's my job, not your job. That's what I have to do. Once it moves from there, here's your job. The power of the legislature, if we're to change this at the state level, if we're to create state dedicated funding for transit, and we are an embarrassment to the nation. I just came back from Washington, D.C., and everyone knows the story of Birmingham, Alabama, and knows the story of the failure of the state to fund transit, is that you need to take the message to the rural areas. You need to get the churches and the people to understand the message of transportation. Transportation is not just about moving those people who are transportation, what was the word that the guy in Huntsville used? Transportation deficient. No, deficient. Transportation deficient. It's not just about moving poor people. It's about economic opportunity. It's about common sense. It's about quality of life. It's about ease of burden. I used to live in Long Island. I watched people ride the train 2 hours to work every day. And what do they do all the way? They sit and read the paper. They de-stress. And they don't have to deal with traffic. Wouldn't that be a blessing in Birmingham? So it's not just about poor people. It's about all the people in between. It's a conscious choice to take transit. School buses. In the rural areas, you've got the school buses, you've got the church buses, you've got all these different little entities trying to move people around, struggling to have enough money to fill that void that is sitting there. Failure to communicate. That's your job. You have to teach the people, the actual people. Because right now, here's what I see. I hear nothing from the riders. Butch, am I correct? The riders don't say anything. They're very despondent. The activists are ready to speak, but they're divided among themselves. Okay? The political leaders, I don't even understand that game, even though I'm in the middle of it. And then you have the transit associations that are begging for help, and nobody who has the money is actually listening. Even the corporate sector is not listening. Now, aside from what I'm doing at the state level, I am also going back to Washington to meet with the head of the DOT. I have 3 retired U.S. DOT secretaries willing to come to Birmingham to help us rebuild our system. In Washington, they are looking at flexibility to abolish that cap on metro population so that local entities have a stronger say in where the money goes from the federal level down. Failure to communicate, RPC. Sorry. They're designing things, they're talking about things, but they're not really talking about the users. They're not talking about the activist groups. They're not even talking to the politicians or the transit groups, people like BJCTA, about what we need. What we need is viable, reliable, quality transportation. We cannot build this city. We can't even build an airport. We cannot build high-speed rail. We can't build anything until we have the foundation. The mayor made an announcement the other day about putting in a monorail system from the airport to the fairgrounds, but just to stop for the tourists. Okay? We have a Model T Ford. We don't need a Porsche. Okay? We need to have a plan of action. I'm working with the BJCTA to create a 5-year development plan in the next few months. I'm very impatient. When that comes out, and we've got that plan and that vision in place, then we can give it to you. Because the problem is everybody's talking the language, but nobody knows what to do with the facts that we're given. So my job, Scott's job, the transit job, and the other elected officials that I'll be working with in Birmingham, in Montgomery, up and down the state, and in Washington, is to give you the tools that you need to sell it to the public. Because our elected officials are not going to change their mind until we make sure that they understand the truth of the matter and they understand that we are demanding that the changes be made. Thank you.
Thank you.